Okay, so welcome everyone. We have people joining us from around the world. And again, I mentioned this is the Political Prisoners and Colonized People, the Solidarity Imperative webinar. We've had almost 200 people register for this event. So again, it's really going to be a great group from around the world to be part of this really important discussion. As we get started, I've asked people as you come in to just go ahead and chat in the chat box where you're coming from and any organization or coalition that you're part of so we can see where people are coming in from around the world. This is our 8th webinar in our series, People Power COVID-19 and Beyond, which centers and amplifies the voices of grassroots activists, journalists, trainers, and scholars. Experienced panelists share their knowledge and expertise about the nuts and bolts of how to wage constructive and successful nonviolent campaigns and movements for change. Our webinar series is co-convened by Waging Nonviolence and Solidarity 2020 and Beyond. And I want to recognize Eric Stoner and Waging Nonviolence as our ongoing partner for these series. I'm Catherine Hughes Freytech, the co-director and founder of Solidarity 2020 and Beyond. We're a broad international network of grassroots campaigns and movements based in 70 plus countries around the world and representing more than 100 movements struggling for freedom, rights, justice, and peace. These grassroots communities are working on many issues that are interconnected: environmental justice and against climate change, women's rights and gender justice, racial and caste justice, self-determination, land rights and indigenous rights, and democratization and anti-corruption goals. We believe in the power of ordinary people to organize and mobilize to change injustices in our local communities and, by extension, the world. We believe that this pandemic is a key trigger moment, providing new opportunities, but also dangerous new realities as well. We'd love you to check out our website at solidarity2020andbeyond.org, and we'll put that in the chat. And like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as we amplify the amazing work and lessons learned of nonviolent organizers around the world. I want to thank our Assistant Director, Steve Chase, who's here today, and our interns, Electra, Corinne, Nikki, and Rima. You guys can maybe just wave, give a shout out for who are assisting us today and helped organize this. I see that some people are saying there's no sound available, so hopefully we'll be working on that. And for those of you that are having that issue, we'll get back to you. I just want to go over the structure for today's webinar panel and some guidelines and procedures. We are streaming live on Zoom and Facebook, and we'll be monitoring comments and questions from both of those platforms. This event is being recorded today, and by participating, you are agreeing to the webinar being reposted on YouTube channels, Waging Nonviolence, Solidarity 2020 and Beyond, and the other co-hosts and partners. This panel is scheduled for 90 minutes and will include brief presentations and overviews by the panelists and then discussion among the group. The last 20 to 30 minutes will be open for discussion, comments, and Q&A from our participants. If you have questions, please text them in the chat section, and when called upon by the moderator, you have the option of unmuting and asking them directly, or just having him ask the question for you. We know people have different perspectives and positions, and we welcome those, but we do ask that you communicate these respectfully, or you possibly will have comments deleted and or, in the worst case, be removed from the event. You'll receive a link to share the recording of this program after it's complete, and you can share it with others and watch it again. So we're so excited to be organizing this webinar today in collaboration with the people that really organized it, the New Occupied Peoples Forum, which brings together representatives of 8 still colonized peoples, Resistance Studies Initiative, the International Peace Research Initiative, and the US-based Black-led Spirit of Mandela Coalition. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt Meyer and Rosa Molywan, our 2 moderators for today's discussion. Go ahead, Matt.
Catherine, thank you so much, and all of you who are here this morning, for those of us in the US, and afternoon and evening for the rest of you throughout the world for this very important day. My name is Matt Meyer. I am honored to be here, both in my capacity as the Secretary General of the International Peace Research Association and as a coordinating committee member of the Spirit of Mandela Coalition. I wear other hats with Resistance Studies Initiative and International Fellowship of Reconciliation and War Resisters International, but those are the ones that really focus on today's event because this event is itself a major coalition space. And we are honored to have Solidarity 2020 and beyond and Waging Nonviolence, two collegial organizations doing the tech work to bring us together and to have us part of your ongoing webinar series. And we're also pleased to have Resistance Studies Initiative that helped put this coalition together. But the International Peace Research Association and the Spirit of Mandela Coalition are very, very pleased to be pulling this together. And I'll say the first thing that makes this an historic event. This is the first public event, the first public coming together of the group you said, Occupied People's Forum. And though Catherine said new Occupied People's Forum, the newness, to be clear, is not in the title. It's new insofar as we've only been meeting together for a little over a year, 2 to 3 years. But the occupations, sadly, are not new at all. We have peoples represented who are the still colonized, still occupied people from all over the world. And we realize that the 8 peoples, 4 of whom are presenting today, and others who are here as participants and listening, but who will be with us hopefully in future events, inshallah, that in fact, there's a history of occupation and colonization here that is deep and wide. And we also are recognizing up front that those 8 do not represent all of the colonized people in the world. And in fact, our final speaker today, Jalil Muntaqim, will, amongst other things, talk about the question of internal colonies and how there are people who are in these strange states of not exactly recognized colonies, but are nonetheless colonized in so many, many ways. So it's historic to have us together and historic to have the Occupied People's Forum public for the first time. I put in the chat, and I'll put it in again because I know when people join chat, they don't see the previous chats, a document which is still in motion, like most of our movements and the movement building we're trying to build. But the mission statement of the Occupied People's Forum, which was adopted by us on May Day 2021 and has been revised for today, is being made public for the first time. So I'll put that in the chat and there'll be a later version of it in future times. But it's a great honor to be here. The second historic thing about today is to make clear that as we are in the morning of February 21st, for those of us in the United States, we're commemorating the anniversary of the assassination of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Minister Malcolm X. And that is not coincidental. It's the date we put forward that we most wanted this event to take place. Because as we know, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And it was, of course, Malcolm who, amongst many other things, clearly said that the struggle of colonization and colonialism in this part of the world needed to be not looked at as a civil right within the US, but as an international human right, seen in an international arena. So the Spirit of Mandela Coalition, for those who don't know, and my dear brother Jalil will be saying more about this, I'm sure, during his presentation. But the Spirit of Mandela Coalition put together a major forum at the end of October 2021, an international forum in and of itself that looked at charges against the US for human rights abuses. And I came to a finding 70 years in the making. 70 years ago, Paul Robeson, W.E.B. Du Bois and others, William Patterson and others, charged the US with genocide. And at the tribunal of October 21, that Spirit of Mandela Coalition coordinated, the US was found guilty of genocide on 5 counts. So we come here with that headline, and on Malcolm's a special day for Malcolm, because we understand as a broad coalition and as a coalition of coalitions today for this webinar, that the focus today on political prisoners is one significant and important for all liberation struggles, including the struggles within the US. And so we're honored to be here also because we have 2 former political prisoners, and we have key people that have worked in solidarity with political prisoners. The last thing I'll say before passing this on to my co-moderator, Rosa, is that we are well aware that even within the Occupied Peoples Forum, there are many, many other people languishing in prison who we could not or were not focusing on and spotlighting today. So, for example, the Ambazonian struggle in the English-speaking part of the Cameroon are actually led by their political prisoners there. It's recognized that the leadership of that movement, and it itself is a growing and diverse movement, are really led by those who are inside and who are imprisoned. So we think about all of the imprisoned freedom fighters that we work to free. We say free them all, free them all. And with that, let me pass it on to Rosa. You'll be hearing from 4 peoples after Rosa, and Rosa and I will introduce them one after another as they come in. Thank you very much. Take it away, Rosa.
Thank you, Matt, for your introduction. So my name is Rosa Molywan. I'm originally from West Papua and live in West Papua. West Papua is one of the occupied territory of Indonesia. So we are now part of Indonesia. We are one province of Indonesia, and we were occupied since 1993. So until today, we also still struggling for our rights, which is for our freedom. And I'm also, West Papua is also part of the forum that mentioned by Matt, the Occupied and Colonized People Forum. So we present ourselves as a vehicle and a medium for hosting, discussion, analysis, and learning from each other, but also try to build solidarity, people-to-people solidarity, because that's the most important part of networking as an international solidarity people. And at the moment, our forum is, we come from, it's already been mentioned as 8 struggle, which is Palestine, West Papua, Western Sahara, Tibet, Puerto Rico, Amazonia, Kashmir, and we also have people from Kurdistan and Rojava also join us. And we hope that through this forum, we also bring together activists, leaders, organizers, scholars to build one strong connection. So it's like a weaving of the struggle around the world, even though we have our uniqueness and our differentiation in terms of our struggle, but we have a common thing, which is we fight against colonialism. So we believe that the eradication of the colonialism must be brought together through the collective efforts of people coming together across continents in people-to-people information. So I think this event today is very significant for that mission, and we hope that we can join the dots together. And one very important issue that connects us together is the political prisoners, because in many occupied and colonized territory, we know that we have existence of the political prisoners because of the cause that they're fighting for. So I really feel honored to be present here and to co-moderate this webinar with my friend, comrade Matt, and also to present our comrades who speak about their struggle and sharing with us tonight. Um, yeah, thank you. I give it back to you, Matt.
Thank you, dear Rosa. Let me say, looking at some of the amazing introductions and greetings people are sending through the chat, that I was reticent in one thing, trying to keep all the pieces together of the coalition, that I failed to say that I come to you from New York City on, still occupied and stolen Lenape land. And so we are very aware of the indigenous peoples on whose land we are. Without further ado, let me bring the first speaker out. We have from Occupied Palestine an extraordinary voice, the leader of the group, the executive director of the group Adamir, which works for the freedom of all Palestinian political prisoners and is a key centering voice for the Palestinian movement. A lawyer by trade, but an organizer and a coalition builder by force of will. Please help me in welcoming Sahar Francis.
Hello, everyone, and I'm so honored to be sharing this platform with you all today. It's really very important, very interesting, and very needed, especially now in this period in the occupied territories, especially for the cause of the Palestinian political prisoners and Adamir as an organization that was designated as a terrorist group by the Israeli occupation last October. So at the end of the day, being a lawyer, defending and representing and fighting for the rights of the Palestinian political prisoners, in October, I discovered that I'm a very threatening terrorist to the security of the people, maybe not just in Palestine, but all over. This is an honor for me to, this shows that we are in the correct path. And when we really say freedom all, it came after long decades of work, that through this work, we discovered that there is huge similarities between the oppression, the violations, and the torture, the ill treatment, the systematic policies that states use in order to oppress people fighting for their freedom. And this is what convinced us more and more that we have to join efforts with all of the people struggling around the world in the similar causes against colonialism, against occupation, against serious violations for our basic rights as people want to live in peace and dignity all over. And this is what brought Adamir to be coordinating and campaigning for political prisoners and trying to put the Palestinian political prisoners case in connect with the other political prisoners all over the world, whether in the hunger strike experience, because like when you take the case of the Palestinian political prisoners, we do have long history of imprisonment, because since the creation of the state of Israel and colonization for Palestine back in 1948 and much before as well, under the British mandate to Palestine, the imprisonment was a very essential tool in oppressing and maintaining the control over the Palestinian people. It continued, and it's still continuing till today. So the same more or less laws that were developed inside the state of Israel under the British security regulations umbrella and all the security defined strategies and procedures in the courts were also implemented after the occupation of the rest of Palestine in 1967 in order to continue policies like administrative detention, arresting people without any charges, without any due process. You wouldn't know why you are arrested, and you could be spending years in detention because they can renew these military orders indefinitely. And currently, the 500 administrative detainees, the Palestinian detainees under administrative detention, are struggling against this policy of administrative detention after long experience of individual hunger strikes in the last couple of years by individual administrative detainees that didn't succeeded to broke the strategy. As a strategy, they decided to boycott the military court procedures in order to put pressure. And this is where it comes the importance of such solidarity networks, how we can support each other struggles. Is there a problem? Okay,
Frank Brown needs to be muted. If you can mute Frank Brown, please. Sorry, Sahar, please proceed.
So I would use the example of the administrative detention because, like in Palestine, there's thousands of Palestinian prisoners. Like currently, it's more than 4,500. But over all these decades, we reached more than 800,000 Palestinian men and women who were arrested, which means there's no one single house in Palestine that they didn't experience at least once what it means to be imprisoned, tortured, and facing military court procedures. This is relevant for each and every individual in Palestine. This is how much the role of the Palestinian prisoners movement is very important in our political life. Of course, we cannot discuss all the elements of the Palestinian political prisoners' experience, but I hope in the question and in the discussion we can reflect in other aspects. I wanted to highlight the need to support the administrative detainees in ending the policy of administrative detention. International groups like the Committee for the Special Group for Arbitrary Detention and the Committee Against Torture described the way how Israel is using administrative detention actually as amounting to psychological torture, because you would be arrested without knowing when you would be released. So it's really a very harsh imprisonment tool. And this is why I believe that we can all share in highlighting the harsh use of administrative detention and putting pressure on not just Israel, because I'm aware that other countries are using such a way of imprisonment indefinitely based on secret information without any ability for the detainee to defend himself properly. Let's join efforts in order to put pressure on these states on the international level, on the UN, to find these perpetrators accountable for the international human rights standards and to put an end for the administrative detention. Thank you.
Rosa, you're going to introduce Luis, yeah?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Louis, and thank you for Sahar for your sharing. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, our comrade Luis Rosa. Luis Rosa is a Puerto Rican former political prisoner, and he is also a human rights activist with Casa Correctes. I hope I pronounced it correct. So please, Luis Rosa, please share your experience and story to all of us.
Thank you, Rosa. And can everyone hear me okay? Thank you, and I'm glad to be here. Like Sarah just suggested, many of these countries that are engaged in conflict normally construct or end up developing programs that are designed to imprison those who struggle, those who struggle for freedom or who struggle against injustices. In the United States, Jali can attest to, and many of us can attest to the creation of the COINTELPRO program, which was particularly designed to imprison, incarcerate, discredit, and basically take out of commission any leadership of within our communities, the Black and Brown communities specifically. As a result, many Puerto Ricans in our struggle for independence have gone to prison. Hundreds have gone to prisons. As a matter of fact, we've had political prisoners in every decade since the U.S. invasion in 1898. And prior to that, under the Spanish government, one of the first political prisoners, independentistas political prisoners, was a woman named Maria de Mercedes Barbudo, who spent years in prison for conspiring to help Simón Bolívar liberate 5 of the nations in Latin America. So we're very familiar, and perhaps we should discuss what, in essence, is a political prisoner. We all know that U.S. jails, and there was a case in the 1960s where we would say that every Black and brown person in prison was a result of a political strategy to imprison, and therefore should be deemed as political prisoners. I sort of differ from that because I believe that we are, although there was political consequences that led to some of the decisions made by people, I think that we should narrow it down to and to a sense of responsibility and a sense of what our society needed at that particular moment. Political prisoners are born out of a repressive system. There is a direct result of the confrontation with a repressive system. Repression, as we know, breeds resistance. And sometimes the consequence of resistance is that some are incarcerated, some are neutralized and killed. And but mostly those who are incarcerated are treated differently than the general population. In my case particularly, I was transferred 22 times within 8 different prisons. I was one of the prisoners who had to take a mugshot every month and had to move from a particular cell in the gallery every month. My family was harassed when coming to visit. As a matter of fact, my mother was hospitalized at one time. There was an attempt kidnapping on my son at the age of 3. There was my brother was arrested and was also a political prisoner. My other family members were threatened and lost their jobs or so there's a whole harassment. Most of the time, the conviction, the sentencing, and the treatment of us was not necessarily meant for us. It was meant for those who dare to support us, those who dare to struggle along our side. I was sentenced to 108 years without killing anyone, without harming anyone, just for conspiracy to overthrow the U.S. government. And this was a conspiracy that we refused to fight in court because we do not recognize the jurisdictions of U.S. court due to our colonial situation. So when you talk about political prisoners, you talk about some of the men and women who have defended the rights of our communities to live peacefully, to live without police repression, to live without the abuse committed by outside landlords. So these are the teachers, these are the doctors of our communities, and as in the case of Sundiata Kohli, as in the case of Leonard Patir, as in the case of many of our political prisoners who still remain within prison walls. they are the leaders of these communities. They are the ones who took it upon themselves and joined others to combat injustices. So there will continue to be political prisoners because as long as repression exists, there will be resistance, and we need to come together and support some of these prisoners. The average time spent within U.S. prisons of our political prisoners today is over 4 decades. Imagine that. That's sometimes a lifetime for people. Leonard Peltier has been in there for over 40 years. I had the privilege and honor to be in the prison where he was at for the last 3 years of my life, the last 3 years of my sentence. And he was a mentor. He was even a spiritual guide to me, as well as Jan Lamin and Tom Manning and others. We cannot allow these comrades to continue to suffer the conditions of prison. We know many of them have suffered through sensory deprivation, where they've been thrown in isolation in cells that are totally white, not allowed to feel or see colors or other human beings. These are forms of tortures. These are sophisticated forms of tortures that are perhaps not mentioned in the daily conversations around prisons. But they've built prisons specifically for political prisoners. Lexington, Kentucky was one of them, where women prisoners were thrown in an underground dungeon, basically denied these sensories. Marion prison in Illinois, the ADX unit in Colorado. These are prisons that we need to shut down, that we need to come together around and shut them down. Because at any time, those of us who continue to do this work, to continue to struggle against injustice, can face these conditions as well. So I'm thankful for this group. I'm thankful for this webinar. I think it's very, very necessary. We need to create solidarity groups around the world. We need to be in those marches, in those protests with the Palestinians, with the Azerbaijan, with people around the world. So in solidarity, I thank you for this opportunity and continue the struggle. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis, Rosa, for your sharing. And thank you for reminding us about all comrades and all friends who are sacrificing their lives for the struggle of the people. And every day we remember them, as not by losing them, but it also bring their spirit to our life, so then it will keep us continue to fight for justice. And you mentioned about the women's political prisoner, and as a woman, I feel very connected to the strength of the women in our community everywhere around the world. And I'm happy to introduce my dear friend, women leaders, Ingia Mohammed. She's from Western Sahara. She's a president of NOVA, and she's also a youth activist in the refugee camps outside the occupied territory of Western Sahara. And Ingia and her group have very inspiring work, and we will let Ingia to share her work and also her story from refugee camps in Western Sahara. Please, Ingia, I welcome you to Story with Us.
Hi, and good afternoon to everyone. I wish that everyone is fine and happy. I'm really happy to be here among these faces and these people that believe in solidarity, in justice, and in the rights of people to self-determination and to choose freely their fate. So thank you for this opportunity, and we really appreciate it. I'm Ingia Mohammed Lahu, the president of NOVA, the group of Nonviolence in Western Sahara, which is a group of volunteer youth and we work for the promotion of the culture of nonviolence among the Sahrawi community, as well as the promotion of human rights, dialogue of culture, and in general for the advocacy for the rights of the Sahrawi people to self-determination and independence. First of all, please give me the opportunity to briefly tell you about the Sahrawi history and the current situation of the issue these times. So Western Sahara was occupied by Spain from 1884 until 1975, and then it was also occupied again by Morocco and Mauritania in the same year as a result of Madrid Agreement, which was organized between Spain, Mauritania, and Morocco in the 14th of November 1975. And according to this agreement, Western Sahara was divided between Morocco and Mauritania. In 1979, Mauritania withdrew from Western Sahara and it remained occupied by Morocco until the moment. There was a war between the two parties, Polisario, which is the unique and legitimate representative of the Sahrawi people, and the Kingdom of Morocco. It continues until 1991. And it's good to mention that due to this war, almost 30% of the Sahrawi territories were liberated. So in 1991, a ceasefire agreement was signed between the two parties under the supervision of United Nations and the African Union, where the United Nations promised the Sahrawi people to organize a referendum for self-determination, and for this reason, it assigned the MINURSO mission. But unfortunately, that have not happened until the moment, and the Sahrawi people continued suffering from the occupation of Morocco without allowing us to choose freely our fate and future. In the last October 2020, a group of Sahrawi civilians organized a peaceful demonstrations in front of the illegal bridge called El Gargarat. They were calling for its closure and reminding the United Nations of the need to fulfill its pledge to the Sahrawi people and enable them to have their legitimate right to self-determination and independence. These demonstrations continued until the 13th of November 2020, where the ceasefire agreement was violated by Morocco throughout attacking some civilians demonstrating there. And this led to the renewal of the war again between the two parties. That's in general a brief view about the Sahrawi history and the situation now. Regarding the situation of the political prisoners, the occupation authorities in the occupied Sahrawi territories pursues a policy of arbitrary arrestments, intimidation against Sahrawi citizens for only that they have expressed their political, economic and social views and aspirations. Some of these arrests happen without courts, and others happen in unfair courts. And others also are transferred from civilian courts to military courts, as well as the fabrication of the accuses. The situation of the Sahrawi political prisoners in the Moroccan prisons is really disastrous in terms of all, in terms of the healthy and psychologically conditions where they are prevented from their most basic rights. Also, they are deported to the worst Moroccan prisons, far from their families, where the most horrific methods of torture and abuse are used against them. They are also prevented from the visit of their families, prevented from medications, and prevented from entering and reading books and everything that can contribute in the formation of the political prisoners. And also they are prevented from any contact with the outside world. The Moroccan authorities also adopt the policy of starvation for the Sahrawi political prisoners in its prisons. And despite the clear evidences of condemnation, they also torture them in order to extract some statements by coercion. And best example for all that is the judgments issued by the Court of Appeal in Morocco, in the Moroccan city Sella, regarding the political prisoners of Gdeymizik in 2010. The judgments for these political prisoners were between life imprisonment for some of them, like the example of Bahah Sidi Abdullah, Brahim Ismaili, Bani Muhammad, Boutengiza, and many others. Also judgments of 30 years of prison for Ni'ma al-Asfari, Bank al-Sheikh, Burial Muhammad, and others. Also 20 years of prison for Abdullah Tubali, Muhammad al-Tahlil, and Khad al-Bashir. So, and many others, of course. I just put some examples. And like another illustrative example of the oppression that the political the Sahrawi political prisoners face from the Moroccan occupation authorities is the case of Mohammed Lamin Haddi, who was in the prison of Tiflat II in Morocco, far from his family, and he was in an isolated prison cell. They also confiscate his properties and prevented him of medication, and all that led him to start a hunger strike. And even after the release of the political prisoners, they are exposed to the permanent supervision, where they supervise them where they go and what they do and the situation of their families, etc. They also prevent them from work after they have been released. So it's good also to mention that the Human Rights Watch organization and many other international organizations called Morocco to apply the immediate release for the Sahrawi political prisoners, especially the case of the Gdeymizik political prisoners. So that is in general the catastrophic or the disastrous situation that the Sahrawi political prisoners live in the Moroccan prisons, and freedom for the Sahrawi political prisons, and freedom for all the political prisons in all the world, and solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingia, and thank you all. Before introducing our final panelist, I'll just say I was texting to Rosa, my co-moderator, what a special gift, and sometimes we just say blessing, that we have Sahar and Engia and Rosa here with us. I think the majority of folks on this call are from, at least the Eastern Hemisphere, from the US, and even from the global North. So it's not a small thing to have strong connections to these very, very strong people, these militants from within Palestine, Ramallah, within Western Sahara, or just nearby the occupied territories, and within West Papua, as those three sisters are coming to you from within the territories of struggle. It's also true that we return with the last speaker to what some of us refer to as the belly of the beast, the center of global empire, because we do understand that though most struggles around the world, and we have struggles represented here, of course, from Africa, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and the Middle East, most liberation movements understand that political prisoners are at the center of them. Spirit of Mandela took our name from the world's most famous political prisoner, Nelson Mandela, but the next speaker served more time in prison than Nelson Mandela spent in prison. And in fact, though the US continues to deny the existence of political prisoners within the US, there can be a few better spokesperson than the following representative who just got out of prison very recently, a year or so ago. As those of us around him know, like many of his comrades and colleagues from the Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army, and other related movements, he hit the ground running. He did not waste a minute before getting deeply involved, not just in putting his life together after over 30 years in prison, but working for the freedom of all people. And in many ways, this date, having it today on this special day for Malcolm X and those who stand in his shadows, but also, this coalition event was really in some ways his brainchild. So it's a great honor and a great pleasure for me to introduce my fellow Spirit of Mandela Coordinating Committee member and great former political prisoner, but always militant Black Panther, Jalil Muntakim.
Thank you, Matt. Assalamu alaikum. Paz, peace, bonjour, guten tag, habarigani, jamboa, hafa adia, and shalom. Whatever language that you may have that expresses the ideas of sincerity and spiritual peace and solidarity, I wish to express that to you today in my greetings. I'm Jalil Muntakim. I'm a veteran member of the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army. I was originally arrested in 1971 and not released until October 6, 2020. I did nearly 50 years in prison, 49 years and a couple of months in prison, as a result of my resistance to white supremacy and capitalist imperialism. I think it's important for us to understand that in terms of our relationship with one another and what we're here for is to build the kind of solidarity, international solidarity, that has not existed since the Comintern. We need to really build an idea of what we are struggling for, and as much as what we're fighting against. And that's what's important here in this open discussion that we're having today. As a part of my incarceration, my imprisonment as a political prisoner of war, I've authored 2 books. One was called We Are On Liberators. One called We Are On Liberators, and the other book is called Escaping the Prison. That's PRISM, Fade to Black. It's a compilation of poems and essays. In 2018, I was held in solitary confinement in Southport Correctional Facility, New York State. And it was a result of me teaching Black history to students in Attica Correctional Facility. And these prisoners that I was teaching history to were primarily gang members involved in street organizations like the Crips and the Bloods and etc. And I was teaching the history of Black history coming from 1861 up into October 1966, at which point in time you had to talk about the Black Panther Party that came in existence in October of 1966. And as a result of my teaching, the prison administrator says, no, we're not allowing you to teach this course or teach this issue to these young men. And they put me in solitary confinement for 4 months for teaching history, an approved class. But when I started talking about the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army and the struggles for national liberation and independence, they shut the program down and put me in solitary confinement for 4 months. Now, while I was in solitary confinement, of course, let me make this point also clear. What they don't want you to teach in prisons is liberation. They don't want to teach prisoners the idea of becoming empowered and their own independence. They want to teach prisoners the idea of capitalism and imperialism, and that they are, in fact, a colonized nation within the confines of 3,000 to 2,000 miles existence of the United States that we now call the United States, which is Turtle Island, by the indigenous people of this land, of this country, this area. All right. And so for us, it is always important for us to be able to propagate, promote, and educate the ideas of national liberation and independence. And that's the reason one of the books of We Are On Liberators was written for that particular purpose. Now, again, in 2018, while I was in solitary confinement, I made a proposal to our comrades in the streets, the need for us to bring international jurists back to the United States. They had been here in 1981, 82. We had brought the international jurists in as a result of another campaign that we had mounted in support of political prisoners in the United States. And as a result of my proposal, Brother Matt, my comrade Sekou Adinga, and Jihad Abdul Muhammad, who is the chairman of the National Jericho Movement, and many others joined in this force, and they decided that they wanted to bring the issues, not only the issues of political prisoners, bring the international jurists to the United States and raise the question of genocides. All right, and as a result of that, we were harking back to December 17th, 1951, 2 months after my birthday, when the great Paul Robeson and William Patterson had first introduced the idea of the question of genocide to the United Nations. And they were hounded across this country. Paul Robeson was prevented going to Europe, going to Germany, going to Geneva, and William Patterson was hounded in Europe. And they tried to prevent him from coming back to the United States, but I presented this issue to the United Nations, to the World Court. And so for our instance, as Matt has already made mention, on October 25th, 2021, we were successful, bringing international jurists to the United States and raising the charge of genocide. We raised 5 charges. The 5 charges was the police killings of Black people. As you well know, they kill Black people every day in this country. But really, some we hear about, but majority we do not hear anything about. Mass incarceration. We know that mass incarceration is a policy of the United States, right? And one of the issues in terms of it is prevent the birth of Black, brown, and indigenous people in this country, right? Because they're locking people up at the age of 13 to 16 years old and keeping them in prison for life. My comrade Louis Rosa, he made mention of the fact that some of our comrades have been in prison 30, 40, 50 years, right? I'd just like to name a few, if you don't mind. Mumia Abu Jamal was arrested in 1980. Suniyat Okoli was arrested in 1973. Imam Jamil Al-Amin in 2000. Varan Zubaros in 1973. Leonard Peltier, 1972. Kamal Siddiqui, 2003. Dr. Mutulu Shakur, 1968. And one of our longest held political prisoners is Rochelle Senku McGee, who's been in prison for 58 years, since 1963. So we understand that the mass incarceration is part of the process of not only preventing the development of what COINTELPRO once fought against or tried to prevent from happening, is the rise of a Black Messiah, or the rise of a real Mau Mau in the United States, a revolutionary force in the United States. And COINTELPRO destroyed that. And this is one of the reasons why we have so many of our comrades in prison today and in prison for long periods of time. The Genocide Convention also raised the question of the political prisoners in the United States and the United States failure to even acknowledge the existence that there's one dissent in the United States, and because of virtue of dissent, the people are arrested based upon their politics and therefore the existence of political prisoners. 4, environmental racism. I believe that Comrade Rosa or Matt had made mention of the fact that the conditions in the United States, particularly for Black, brown, and indigenous people, they are located in areas where there's environmental racism that causes conditions for high degrees of diabetes and other kinds of illnesses that goes on in our communities, right? Which is tantamount to the issues of racism and public institutional racism, and also the question of healthcare. We know that the issues of genocide brought the issues of healthcare, racial healthcare inequities in the United States. As you well know, for many of us, particularly Black and brown people, that our mortality rate is less than half of that of white people in the United States, right? White people live twice as long in most instances than Black and brown people in this country and the indigenous people in this country. Why is that? Environmental racism, health racism in this country, okay? So cumulatively, when we look at the whole picture, we can say that the conditions of Black people, brown people in the United States over the last 400 years has suffered under the rubric of white supremacy. Understand that, right? We have lived in a system of white supremacy over 500 years. So you imagine dehumanization, the degradation, the diminishing of the lives and the values of Black and brown people in this country. indigenous people in this country. It's deliberate. It's purposeful. This is why we have to engage in struggle. All right? It's important. This is why we build it outward into international community so they can understand what we're fighting for inside. Why? Because as Matt mentioned, that we are in fact dealing in what? The belly of the beast. Right? While those of you on the outside are cutting off the tentacles of this octopus, right? Unfortunately, many instances when you defeat colonialism, neocolonialism, it returns. Why? Because we have not dealt with the head yet, the octopus head. Right? That's our goal. That's our objective. I need for you to understand that, right? That our freedom is subject to your freedom. Your freedom is subject to our freedom. Because we have a common enemy, white supremacy and capitalist imperialism. That's our common enemy, right? That's what we're struggling against. That's who we're struggling against. So for us, in terms of building that abolitionist movement, right? Our argument is that we're taking the idea of abolition to a higher level. We want to abolish anything that dehumanizes, degrades, and diminishes the value of Black, brown, and indigenous people in this country. Abolish it. Terminate it. White supremacy needs to be terminated. It is the plague of the planet for Black, brown, and indigenous people in this country and around the world. Right? And that's our goals and objectives. We have to come on the same page on the international level, right? We have seen what happened on January 6th here in the United States. The white supremacists tried to storm the Congress. And if there had been Black, brown, indigenous people doing that, what were you seeing across the Congressional Plaza? Bodies that were mowed down. Why not white people? Why not? Right? And the reason why, because they adhere to the same principles of white supremacy. They may not like the method in which they moved, what they did, but in terms of ideologically, politically, they're on the same page. Those in Congress and those white folks who was trying to storm Congress, they're on the same page. All right? You got to understand that. And so this is part of our struggle moving forward. And so we had a judgment. We had a judgment on October 25th. International jurors found the United States guilty of genocide against Black, brown, and indigenous people on those 5 counts. We express this throughout the world. Now you can point to the United States and says, you've been found guilty of genocide. Right? They cannot harbor an argument of human rights against any other country, failures of human rights in any other country, without first pointing the finger back to the United States and their failures. And their understanding of what they have engaged in the last 400 years is genocides against Black, brown, indigenous people. Understand that. We are changing the narrative of our struggle in the United States. We're changing the narrative to one of human rights based upon the instructions of El-Haj Malik Shabazz. Right? He told us if as long as we kept our struggle within the domestic territory of the United States, it would continue to be confined and defined by our oppressor. But when we take our struggle to the international community, then we are engaging our struggle with all other people who are fighting against our common enemy and the issues of human rights. It's important for you to understand that, right? And so with that, I want to end this this discussion, this talk. Maybe we can open up to for open discussion and debate on the issues. But primarily, our goal and objective is to extend our struggle to that of the international community, so we have a clear understanding of what we're engaged in and where we have commonality in terms of what's going on. As you struggle against the tentacles of this octopus, right? We are fighting in this head, right, to destroy this monster, all right? And we need your support. We need your support. In closing, I'm going to put something in the chat, some links to the chat, and hopefully you'll find of some greater interest in regards to everything that we're doing or trying to achieve here in the United States in our struggle. Thank you very kindly for this opportunity, and all power to the people.
All power to the people, and thank you, Jaleel. Thanks to all of you. For all of us, Spirit of Mandela Coalition, Occupy People's Forum, and all of the co-sponsors of this event, this webinar, this space here is an important part of moving forward what Brother Jalil just put forward of coming together on an international level for mutual support and solidarity. That's why we named this forum the Solidarity Imperative, because we all need one another. And I'll just give a little shout out to my dear sister, Dequi Kiona Siddiqui, another member of the Spirit of Mandela Coordinating Committee, who has been populating the chat with all kinds of links and cheers and information, because she's a font of information as a core and key organizer, and also just put in the chat, none of us are free till all of us are free, which is of course the point of this work. It's not a surprise that our speakers are not only former political prisoners and their frontline supporters, that they should take the time they were supposed to take and not go over. So we have the 25, 30 minutes we had hoped for questions and answers. And it seems to me most appropriate to have the first question, which is a very, very good question, actually come from the founder of Solidarity 2020 and beyond, or one of the founders. So I think mostly Rosa and I are going to try to read out the questions to streamline things. But Catherine, you are a voice here amongst us and one of the core people putting together this forum. So since this question comes from you, I'd like you to open your mic and say the question yourself to all of the panelists. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, all of the co-sponsors, and thank you, all of you.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you to the panelists. As always, I've learned so much. Many of these movements I've been working on Palestine for 35 plus years, went during the first Intifada. Western Sahara we're working on quite closely. Western Papua is part of our group. Puerto Rico, it's so glad to have you here. Jalil, it's so amazing what you're doing with the Mandela, the Spirit of Mandela group, and everything that you have been through and stood up to for justice and peace. And so my question basically is to all of you. You talked so much and so amazingly about the background of your struggle, the demands, the idea of settler colonialism, the idea of imperialism, and all of the horrible things that political prisoners who are standing up to those things have to face. What I'd like to know for our group here, we have a number of people also visiting from around the world who are part of movements, is what would you suggest that we do? How can we push this forward in solidarity with you as leaders to advocate for the political prisoners, but also for the demands that you have more broadly for your causes and for self-determination? And then secondly, could you talk a little bit about the amazing strategy and tactics that many prisoners and political prisoners have used over the years to organize themselves and to push for various demands and to try to move their demands and their movements and campaigns forward? We know that there are so many ways that they've done that and empowered themselves as well. And then how do we stand in solidarity with that leadership? So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Let me suggest to the speakers that we hear from you, since it's to all of you, about strategies and tactics in response in the order you went in. And Rosa, I'm going to ask you if you start us off, because even though you're co-moderator, you're also our Western Papua rep. So I would say Rosa, Sahar, Luis, Nguia, and Jalil. And since I believe each of you could probably answer that question with 10 minutes, and we would go over time and have no time for questions, we're just going to ask you for very, very brief responses to that question. Hopefully we'll get a couple of more questions in as well, and recognize that this is not the last time we'll be all together. So we'll leave you wanting more, and we'll see you again. But right now, Rosa, please, you can begin responding to the question.
Thank you, Matt. I'm actually feels like I'm on the fire right now, listening to my comrades speaking. It's really, really inspiring, and to see how people very consistent and their commitment are very strong to the struggle. And I feel like I don't have question, but I just want to express my feeling as a person who also I'm not a political prisoner, but I work very close with my comrades who have been arrested. And even today, I went to the court And I had to accompany my friend to the prison because of today's decision. So it's really kind of a positive energy that I get today from everyone who's speaking here, but also who presents in this webinar. And I really want to thank Jalil for your words. I can really relate myself and my struggle, our people's struggle here with what you have said. And I can say that white supremacy is always changing the face, changing the form, but it's still the same head of the octopus. And I mean, I live on the coastal area here in the Pacific Ocean, and we can see that the octopus, it has, we can't really catch the octopus. Otherwise, we have very good strategy and tactics to catch there. So learning from the fishermen how they dive into the deep ocean and try to really look at how to find the weakness of the octopus and then catch that. So I think to respond to the question about strategy and tactic, I think as we know that we're facing the same head of the octopus, I think we need to share together and learning together, but also try to find the right strategy and tactic to catch that head of our octopus, so then we can cut the head. And I think it's the work of very strong organizing, but also strong commitment of the struggle. So yeah, I'm very honored to be here and get the spirit. And I read a lot about Black Panther, and now I'm listening to someone who are also part of that, and I'm very honored and thank you so much. And yeah, I think from my side is we need to find a way to catch that octopus and cut the head with a good strategy and tactic. Thank you. Oh,
Yes.
we have one question. Yeah, we will continue.
Shall I go, Matt? So I think I'll start with your second question, Catherine, how the prisoners managed to organize. In our context as Palestinian prisoners, it's a long story because they have long history of how to build the movement inside the prison on the educational level programs, communicating with each other in order to organize for having a mass hunger strike, for example, as it happened in 2017 or 2012. So it's really very interesting to learn how they are struggling in order to organize. And this is a reason why they would be attacked every time and punished and isolated, and they will distribute them in order to break such structures that they manage to build inside the prison. So actually, this is a cause why the Palestinian prisoners on daily basis, sometimes they would face attacks by the guards and the prison system in order to affect their organizing. And this year, with the escape of the 6 prisoners from the Gilboa prison, you can imagine the level of punishments that the prisoners' movement were subjected for after this success, even if it was for 1 week, but the consequences is still going on actually. On the first question, I think it's very, very important for me to highlight that we have, of course, there's huge importance in raising awareness and sharing information in between each other and educating ourselves. I learned a lot today about the Puerto Rican context, about all the other areas. So it's very important to share the information, to distribute it, to raise awareness within our communities about the other struggles, but it's not enough because we have power to do things. For example, I was thinking if there's a company, for example, that is complicit in the United States prison system in oppressing and violating prisoners' rights, and you, Jalil, wants to fight against this company, maybe this company is sharing the tools and the techniques and the technology in prisons in Israel against the Palestinian prisoners, or in Morocco against the Western Sahara prisoners. This is how we can share and how we can support each other's struggles. So I think this is a very good start, that we can look for joint campaigns against such entities that violates our rights in order to fight back against.
Well, in our case, different conditions call for different strategies, right? Different tactics. Within the prison walls, it was very important for us to be consistent with our principles. It was very important for us to create relationships with other prisoners built on respect and love and understanding. So one of the things that we often do is we create neutral zones within prisons. And in my case, particularly, I created cultural centers within prisons where different organizations, different gang members can come. These are gang members that are usually at odds with each other, are usually at war, but they can come to this space that's neutral and receive political studies, receive different educational programs, and we offer that to them. And that's why it's very important for the political prisoners, once they go into these particular areas, to be consistent. And I think we've all done that. We've all, because we no longer belong to ourselves. We belong to a community, we belong to a movement, and we belong to humanity. So we need to be consistent with those principles. On the outside, our committees, and then we need to be also in constant contact with the outside. That's why when they put a prisoner in isolation, is they do it for a particular reason. They want to cut that. They want to cut that contact with the outside world. And it was very important for us, and it's very important for us today to be in touch with the outside, and for the outside to be that vigilant group that assures us that there's somebody watching over us and the way we're treated, and that in any instant can protest around that prison facility. We've had many protests around that we closed down prison facilities because of that. And we need to be visual. We need to become a visual entity in our communities. There was a time where most people did not know who were the political prisoners, and so we need to paint murals. We need to make them household names where they're mentioned, where the cases are mentioned. There's no reason in the world why we don't know who Mutulu Shakur or Sandiara Kohli or Leonard Patir or Mumia Abdul Jamar is. We need to know these names. We need to become them. And in essence, we need to feel their pain, because there's no greater love than solidarity. When you feel the pain of others and move and accordingly to that. And then strategy internationally, the struggle of Palestine is my struggle. Their enemy is my enemy. The struggle of West Sahara, the struggle of anywhere around the world, West Papua is my struggle. Anywhere where there's someone being oppressed, that has to be my struggle. And we have to know about these struggles enough where there's institutions that we support, unconsciously support these institutions that are repressing. We need to have a list of names of companies that are pumping billions of dollars into Israel for the war machine against the Palestinians, and we need to boycott them. The same thing with all these other countries. And so we need to create our own think tanks, right? We need to create our own groups that are doing these researches and offering it to people who struggle around the world. And again, visualize, say the name of these political prisoners, know their names, know their history, because it is our history. Thank you.
Yes, I think this is very important. Go ahead, Matt.
I think Yagia is going to go next. And then you'll have the last word on this, Jalil. And Gia, you're still with us, yes?
Yes, thank you. So regarding the strategies of solidarity and what the international community activists can do for the Sahrawi issue, but for all the occupied people and all the people that live in injustice. So as all of you mentioned, so following the rule of your struggle is my struggle, and that everyone stays in solidarity with his brother and sisters in all the world. So lots of things can be done. For example, at least making and raising awareness about these issues, for example, about the Sahrawi issue in your own countries, and making the people there know about this forgotten issues. That is a big triumph, and that is big achievement for humanity in general. Also using the social media by organizing and joining the campaigns. For example, the campaign that's called for not stealing the Western Sahara natural resources. Demonstration. Sorry, I forgot demonstrations against yes, before the embassies, before the Moroccan embassy, the embassy of France, and all these countries that contribute in the continuation of our suffering. So also boycotting the products by the companies that are and make agreements with Morocco. All these strategies can be done, and all of them will bring big results for the humanity and for us like occupied people. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. I appreciate your position in regards to the Palestinians and all those who engage in struggles in Western Sahara. It's very important for us to support that, and no doubt. And as we support also our struggles and our comrades in Palestine and those who have been held in the occupied territories of Palestine. For us here in the United States, in regards to what we have achieved or what we find going next, in regards to what has happened with the International Tribunal and the verdict of guilty against the United States for the charges of genocides, we're moving forward to building what we call the People's Senate. And that's how we're developing going forward. We feel there's a need to create an alternative institution to the institution that presently exists in the United States, and to galvanize a movement of building what we call an alternative existing, what we call decolonization programs. We are building called decolonization programs across the country that's going to be linked together, what we call building towards what we call a People's Senate, an alternative governing body of what it means to be governed and how to be governed here in the United States. I go on a little bit more deeply in regards to that issue, but it's not time for us to do it here. We was asked about what goes on inside of prison in terms of our struggles. More often than not, when prisoners find themselves engaged in a necessity to confront our oppressors inside prisons, they will more often than not engage in a hunger strike. Hunger strike has been used across the country and around the world. In some instances, a hunger to death, right? We have found, some of our comrades died in Pelican Bay as regards to the struggles that they have locking up members of progressive organizations in California prison system for years, decades, in solitary confinement. And those brothers and sisters got involved into a hunger strike, was able to change some of the dynamics of their condition. Not only that, do we do petitioning. We have petitioned, for instance, 1977. I initiated the first U.S. prisoners petition campaign to the United Nations. The first time that a prisoner organized in the United States was able to submit a petition to the United Nations that was recorded and heard. So we do petitioning campaigns. We do hunger strikes. We do strikes, work strikes, as Louis Rosa made mention. We do work strikes inside prisons. And in some instances, if necessary, we will retaliate. We retaliate against the kind of brutal oppression and murder against our people. As some of you may remember, Comrade George Jackson and John Cluchet and Drummond, who was engaged in what we call the Soledad Brothers case, right, for retaliating against prisoners being murdered in cold blood in Soledad prison. We know about what happened in Attica in 1971, September 1971, where they massacred entire population, part of the population of the Attica prison system. So Attica prison. So we find that, and for us, we have to be very deliberate in terms of how do we fight back and how do we struggle against our repression. Because we know that these people here in this country are brutal, right? They're murderers, right? White supremacists, they're murderers, right? There's white supremacy in and of itself is an aberration to a human society, right? And to our existence. And they have engaged in mass murder around the world, right, to maintain a system of white supremacy and U.S. capitalist imperialism. And so for us, we have to be very deliberate in the methods in which we organize it. So the people-centered is very important. Yes, indeed, we have to engage in DBS, boycott, sanctions, and divestments. For any organization or any business, corporation here in the United States that's also oppressing people outside of the United States, we need to identify them and build campaigns of DBS to withdraw the finances and support for those corporations. And lastly, I saw in the chat the issues of climate change. Will we be around long enough as the world is being destroyed by these capitalist imperialists? Let's understand this. I'm going to give you one example. Here in the United States, there's 544 billionaires. 544 billionaires in the United States. They have the cumulative wealth of $2.6999 trillion. All the wealth of Western Europe, is accumulated in the hands of 544 people, billionaires in the United States. This is a population of 330 million people. We acquiesce to our own oppression. Do we understand what I'm just saying? Right? We have permitted a system of hoarding of wealth to the detriment of Black, brown, poor people around the world. This is the system of capitalism. Right? The permitting of the hoarding of wealth by a few to the detriment of the many. All right? So that's the course that we're struggling. We have to raise our consciousness in terms of who are we dealing with and why we're dealing with them. And not only to save ourselves as a people, but to save the planet. So these people are responsible for the greatest pollution of the planet. These billionaires, these multimillionaires, all right? This system of capitalist imperialism, right? They're permitting them to hoard wealth to the detriment of poor, Black, brown, indigenous people, poor white people as well in this world. We have to change that. And so for us, it's a process of what we call decolonizing our minds, decolonizing our thinking, become free. Because anyone who has been under a system of white supremacy for 400 years, you can rest assured they've been traumatized. There's no way around it. They have to have been, right? To the point where now today, for many of us here in the United States, our condition of oppression has been normalized, right? It becomes a condition almost of acceptance, as if you cannot fight back. And we have to change that. We have to change that paradigm. We have to change that mentality, right? And begin the process of decolonization across the country, around the world, right? We're going to abolish white supremacy. We're going to abolish capitalist imperialism. And so for us, that is what next. We're building a people Senate, right? We're going to define the means where we can begin to identify those corporations and businesses where we can engage in nationally and internationally, right? DBS, right? And this is how we build our solidarity. This is how we strengthen our capacity to engage in the struggle, right? And with that said, I want to say that for us, right, not only are we saving ourselves, we're saving the planet, right? We are our own heroes as much as we are our own liberators, right? Thank you very much for this time and opportunity to speak.
I'm just gonna let Rosa have the last question and the last word. We're gonna have to close this out, but you might have seen in the chat, we're gonna go 15 minutes over. We hope all of you can stay. There will be a link sent to all of you of the video made from this. We want to be very mindful also that the peoples of Tibet, of Rojava Kurdistan, of Ambazonia, of Kashmir, those are part of the Occupied Peoples Forum, and many, many other peoples are also in our hearts and minds, even though they're not at the center of this particular forum. So stay tuned. You'll get emails from us. You'll get more information in the future. Check out the stuff in the chat, because there's lots of links. And for those who ask questions in the chat, we'll try to get some answers from folks, from the panelists, even after this event is over, so that we can have those to you in things that you'll get in emails from us. But with that said, thank you all. Rosa, the last question, the last brief round of answers, and inshallah, we'll see you next time soon as we build the struggle together.
Thank you, Matt. I think what we heard from the speakers today is try to bring the connection of the dots of the issue and the concrete action about how we can work together in our internal community, but also working more broader as an international solidarity. And one of the questions on the chat box by Peter Barus mentioned asking about how we work on this, damage of the earth. And I think Jalil already put that dots connections together to bring a picture of how the impact of all of this capitalism and all the practice of the supremacies that kill indigenous people and people that their territory being occupied. So I think this is a kind of the beginning of how we look at that connection, and I hope that we can continue this, and we still have we will continue with more discussion and bring together people from the occupied territory to share, but also people who work in the solidarity. So do we still have enough time, Catherine, to continue with one or two comments?
Yes, we do, Rosa. I would say we have about 10 minutes, since we're going over 5 to 10 minutes. And then if people want to just give a 1 or 2 statement, final goodbye, final statement, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. So yes, please, I will give an opportunity for any comrades who want to speak. Please make it short, but to the point, so then we have enough time to listen to the response. Please raise your hand or just say something, please. Anyone want to speak or ask?
We're looking for the panelists now to have your last comments. The panelists have your last comments. We have 5 or 10 minutes for the last comments from panelists.
Okay. Please feel free to start. Who wants to start? Just please.
I'll be very short. I'll just really thank you so much, all and everyone. And I think it's very important to keep in touch and really to educate ourselves and to join the struggle to free them all. Thanks for this amazing webinar.
Thank you, Sahar. And we want to hear from Luis Rosa. Please give your comment.
Yeah, myself and my comrades who have been liberated in 1999 are testament to the power of solidarity. We were all sentenced to die within prison walls, and we're out here and continue to struggle along your side because of your solidarity. So please let us be in solidarity with those who need it, and let us free them all. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis Rosa. Ingia, please. Ingia, are you there? I hope her connection is still okay. Ingia, if you have some last statement. Okay, we'll back to Ngia. I'll give a time also to Jalil to make a last comment, and then we will back to Ngia.
Thank you, Sister Rosa. I'd just like to say something very, very simple but very powerful. Che Guevara, I'm paraphrasing, once stated that revolution is motivated by a strong sense of love, right? And I want to make that explicitly clear, that for us, those engaged in this struggle, we have a profound sense of love. Love of our personal humanity and dignity as human beings, right? And love for others who also have that kind of ingratiating desire to be part of the world of humanity, be part of humanity, and his biggest concept of what that means in our civilization, right? And for us, what we're doing today, I take the word. I'm going to put it very briefly. I'm just take this point. I take the word revolution or revolutionary. And I take the R off. And what do we have? We have the word evolution or evolutionaries. Right? And we know that as human beings that we are progressing in evolution of time from one state of development to the next and higher stage of development. And the process by which we do so, for some of us, or the process in which we have to engage in that kind of change, has to be putting the R back on evolution, right? Be revolutionary. And so for us, we are change. We are agents of change, right? Revolutionaries are agents of change to take our humanity from one level of degree of development to a higher level degree in development. The evolutionary process of being a revolutionary. That's what we engaged in. So understanding, I proudly announce myself as a revolutionary, right? Because I said that we are moving our world and our planet to higher degrees of existence and stability, right? The process that we have to do so may very well be revolutionary. And with that, I extend my profound sense of love to all of you.
Thank you, my brother Jalil. And India just sent me a message that the poor connection on the internet, so she writes something, then I will try to read it. India said that thank you so much for this big opportunity. A lot of solidarity, peace, and love for all of us. Thank you, India. And I'll give it back to Catherine. I think our time is almost up, so yes.
Thank you so much to everyone. Peace.
All power to the people.
Yeah, it's love and solidarity and power to the people. And I just wanted to say we'll be following up with you. And this was such an amazing and uplifting panel and initiative. Thank you for everyone that organized it. And our next webinars, number 9, 10, 11, we'll be looking at agents provocateurs. We'll be working with a group called International Network on Victims and Survivors that focuses on transitional justice in many countries around the world. We'll have another one on women's rights and gender justice. That's always an important part. Women are 50%, and if we don't have you in the movement and us, it's not going to be successful. We have some great women panelists today. So thank you, everyone. Love and solidarity, and we'll be in touch with you soon. Freedom all.
Freedom all.
Freedom all.
Unmute and just say goodbye. That's great.
All
Goodbye,
power to
everyone.
the people.
Power to the people. Peace.
Power to the people.
Thank everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Remember not today. Thank you so much. Asante Sana.
Keep
pushing, comrades. Keep pushing.
Alaikum salam.
We will win.